The question of friendship was among the most important ones for ancient man. Aristotle conceived of the perfect friendship, very difficult to come by but extremely beneficial to all participants, and thus this is the virtuous friendship. But before we can even consider the formation of the perfect virtuous friendship, we must first ask the question: what is friendship? For this purpose, we will look at Plato's Lysis today. This is the next dialogue to read after the Alcibiades that we spoke about last week. Please watch the video, please, I beg you, please forgive me. Now, as usual, I will give some contextual informations on this text, although there are barely any to give here this time, and thus a summary of the action, followed by the central questions to the dialogue. Unlike our previous classes on Plato, I would also like to weave in some thoughts by other philosophers, especially Michel de Montaigne. Please tell me in the comments afterwards if you enjoy such reference, yes? Now, the Lysis of Plato is, yet again, an early dialogue. As my viewers know by this point, however, the dating of Plato is a grand, difficult affair. And there is much that can be said in favor of a completely different dating, especially if we take a very esoteric reading approach to the works of Plato. Nevertheless, for the purposes of this video class, it will suffice to call this dialogue an early one. The central theme to the Lysis dialogue is, of course, friendship. But it is important for us to recognize here that our modern understanding of friendship fails when we put it side by side with the ancient Greek term philia. The discussion in this dialogue is centered around this philia, so a very natural question follows. What means philia? You see, in ancient Greek there are 4 words for love: storge, eros, agape, and philia. These are all different kinds of love that you find yourself experiencing toward different people. Storge is the love within a family. You love your offspring, I hope. You love your parents and cousins and so on and so forth. Eros is of course the sensual love, the stuff we modern men passionately enjoy, the stuff we goon for, as they say. The meaning of agape is a bit difficult to pin down, especially because it was picked up by the Christian tradition and turned into a pure Christian love, i.e. a charity-like love that the good Christian experiences for God and vice versa. But in the ancient Greek, epic, Homeric tradition, very nice, this is a love of appreciation. You feel agape when you honor the dead, for example, or when you honor a great general whomst is foundational to your country. A respectful love of sorts. And therefore, the last option remaining for us is the love of your friends, and this is philia. Philia is very different to our modern conception of friendship. We are very loose today with this word. We call people that we've only met a handful of times our friends. Why? As a Russian, I don't understand this at all. In the ancient world, a true friendship is one of profound love. Very profound love. Ideally speaking, this is a selfless love. You wish to be friends with an individual because you desire him to be a part of your life. You wish to give yourself to him. The line between Yukio Mishima-san's style homoeroticism and appreciation of male beauty and the ancient conception of friendship is practically non-existent. This line practically doesn't exist. Perhaps this makes you a little uncomfortable. Regardless, how philia functions is at the center of Plato's Lysis dialogue. What sort of men can and should experience a philia between them? And the way that this dialogue arrives to a discussion of philia is itself very indicative of how central the notion of intense love was to friendship in the ancient world. You see, the dialogue begins with a completely different discussion. Socrates runs into a group of wrestler youths, young, handsome, full of energy, zoomers so to speak, who are of course of very noble birth, great family lines. Socrates, the master matchmaker, quickly understands that one of these youths is hopelessly in love with the namesake of this dialogue, a young noble lad by the name of Lysis. This love is unfortunately totally unrequited, and this love is far more than simple philia. It is all-consuming eros. The youth is unable to sleep, he sings and writes endless songs for Lysis, and yet this eros love is completely unreturned. And from this conversation, a conversation about profound erotic love, we eventually end up at a discussion of philia itself, or friendship as we modern men call it. You understand the connection here, yes? You have profound love of desire to profound friendship. 2 different degrees of love which we can move between. Now it goes without saying by this point that Socrates must start at the very foundations of the topic. In a friendship, we have 2 individuals who are somehow affectionate affectionate toward each other. And so we ask the question, what sort of men form friendships? What sort of men have philia as the product of their union? Any modern man would quickly give the most simple answer here. People who are similar to each other are likely to become friends. But what is this similarity between them exactly? We as students of philosophy, of Socratic philosophy, what kind of men do we care for the most? Of course, we care most for the good man, the virtuous man. And hence, in theory, two good men, two virtuous men, would have philia between them. This friendship of two virtuous good men should result in Aristotle's virtuous friendship, a friendship which improves the virtuous aspects of both men even further. This is a wisdom as old as time. Like attracts like. We see the prophet Homer writing about this. We see the pre-Socratic mystic man Empedocles saying this too in his 22nd fragment. And so all things that are more adopted for mixture are like to one another, and united in love by Aphrodite. Yet those things that differ most in origin, mixture, and the forms imprinted on each are most hostile, being altogether unaccustomed to unite and very sorry by the bidding of strife, since it hath wrought their birth. All this seems to make perfect sense, and yet Socrates finds an issue here for us quite quickly. How can like be possibly attracted by like? In the case of men specifically. Take the good man for example. He has no need of any other man. The good man is totally self-sufficient. He is complete due to his goodness. My goodness. If the good man finds himself needing to unite with another good man, it means that he needs something from this good man. And if the good man needs something, then he obviously isn't self-sufficient and complete in his goodness. Thus he is not a perfectly good man, and thus this is no longer a philia between two equally good men. So let us take the opposite here. What about the bad man with another bad man? Once again, this is impossible according to Socrates because the two bad men have fundamentally evil natures that do not allow for friendship at all. There can be no philia between bad natures because bad natures hurt those around them. And so two bad natures in a friendship union is just one big unpleasantly situation for both parties involved. And so you see, our very natural and seemingly normal definition of friendship being a bond between two similar people seems to not work, at least in the way that Socrates argues it. Of course, we can try the other way here. We could instead say that opposites attract, like magnets. This is once again a wisdom that is backed up by poets and ancient philosophers. For the poets, we have Hesiod, for example, in his Works and Days, ancient text from around Homer's time. We see line 25. And potter is angry with potter, and craftsman with craftsman, and beggar is jealous of beggar, and minstrel of minstrel. Clearly here what Hesiod is saying is that similar men experience jealousy toward one another, because men are very rarely completely equal in their abilities and virtues, and thus any disbalance at all will arouse jealousy. In the case of the philosophers, we see the unity of opposites in figures like, notably, Heraclitus or Anaximander. There is a bit more nuance, of course, to both of these than just simply declaring that these guys recognize that opposites attract or whatever. We will see in depth about these individuals in the future. But for now it will suffice to say that there were many thinking men of wisdom before Socrates that recognized the necessity of opposites. We cannot understand hot without cold. We cannot understand moist without knowing what the dry is. And thus these opposites attract each other and we can view them as one union of concepts. Socrates here of course also arrives at this statement, the statement that opposites attract. But once again, in classic fashion, he finds a very quick way to refute this. While we can indeed think of opposites in terms of concepts within the natural world, this does not work at all for human beings. A just man will never be attracted to the unjust man. His internal values do not allow for this. And generally speaking, the good man, whatever good may mean here, will not experience philia toward the evil man. Likewise, the evil man, whatever we may mean by evil of course, this is all very relative, the evil man will never see a good man who clearly has very differing values from him and for some reason experience a philia toward him. And so we're kind of stuck here it seems. Like attracts like has been thrown out of the window. Throw me out of the window, am I right? Opposites attracting has also been thrown out of the very same window, and we can summarize so far in Socrato-Platonic terms. The good cannot be friends with the good. The bad cannot be friends with the bad. The good cannot be friends with the bad, and of course the bad can also not be friends with the good. All these options have been exhausted. So what exactly are we left with here? We are left with what is between this good and evil. Literally the in-between, or the indifferent man who is neither good nor bad. Let us be careful here, however. The indifferent man cannot be friends with other indifferent men. Socrates has refuted like attracting like. And thus the indifferent man must try to have a philia for the good man. Because obviously, why would the indifferent man ever want to trend toward evil? The same way our bodies strive toward health, which is good, whenever we are sick, instead of striving to even more disease and eventual death, which is evil and bad. The striving of an indifferent man toward the good seems to be almost biological here for Plato and Socrates, a biological function inherent to us, to our mitochondria, powerhouses and such. Small thing to add here, this indifferent man who is striving toward the good pretty much appears to be the philosopher. This is a man who is striving toward the good and away from evil. This is Socrates' Platonic language at least. The philosopher seeks his definition of health and goodness in whatever he thinks this health and goodness can be found, whether this health is virtue or wisdom or whatever. But the seeking philosopher is not perfectly good, virtuous and wise just yet. Obviously, if he was, he wouldn't be a philosopher anymore. No philosophy is needed once perfection is attained. But anyway, we find ourselves with another issue here, however, once again, and several issues in fact. And I'll give you a little spoiler warning from now, none of these issues get resolved in Plato's dialogue Lysis. I shall attempt to give a resolution in just a little bit though. Issue number 1, with the definition of friendship being that indifferent man strives for the good in order to avoid striving for evil, as Socrates and the wrestler youth seem to define it, makes it seem like philia or friendship can only exist if evil itself exists. Thought experiment time. Imagine a world without evil. Having imagined this world and going by the definition we just gave of striving away from evil, if evil doesn't exist and there is no longer this motivating evil force for you to strive toward the good, then there is no reason to strive toward the good at all. We can just stay indifferent. No philia whatsoever will form. Look at it this way. Friendship between the indifferent and the evil is impossible because evil no longer exists in this thought experiment. Philia between the indifferent and the good is also no longer possible because evil doesn't exist, and so we don't have any reason to aim for the good, since evil was the main motivating force for us to strive to the good. And of course, friendship or philia between the indifferent and other indifferent is also impossible because Socrates has refuted like being attracted to like. So what do? Issue number 2 with such a definition is that it would require the existence of an infinite regress in order for this definition to really work. If you're familiar with Zeno's paradox about the turtle and Achilles, you will understand what we're talking about. If you're unfamiliar, well, sucks for you. I joke, please forgive me. Let me explain. If two same men cannot be friends with each other, then the indifferent man is never allowed to reach goodness. Because as soon as he becomes good, there can no longer be philia. He is striving to become good by being friends with the good man, but as soon as he becomes good, the friendship between two equally good men cannot exist. We have refuted like goes to like. However, since the indifferent man is indeed striving for goodness, it means that the striving must be infinite for the philia to exist. How do you create infinite striving between two certain points? An infinite regress. Is an infinite regress possible in human natural world? I don't think so. But mayhaps I am wrong. You correct me, please. My logic is not so good, not so very good. So sorry. Essentially, the indifferent man has to get halfway to goodness. Then he has to get to the halfway of the remaining half. Then halfway of that, and then halfway of that, and then halfway of that. And this is until infinity. Because otherwise, he will eventually achieve total goodness, and then, as we have already said, philia cannot exist anymore. According to Socrates, of course. I don't personally agree. I think this is all Socratic semantics. Yes. Issue number 3 now is that if philia cannot be defined as striving away from evil, then maybe we can define it as coming from desire. Man desires to be with other man for whatever reason, and thus philia forms. But what do we usually desire? We desire things that are good for us, and things that are good for us, they are congenial. But something that is congenial to us is basically the same thing as something being like. to us. And we have of course eliminated like attracting like. If this congenial thing is the good, once again good cannot be with good, and thus this is once again eliminated, no philia. And thus we still have no definition, whether it's striving away from evil or evil doesn't exist, whatever, all these definitions do not work, and this is how Plato leaves us in the Lysis dialogue. Socrates and all the youths he's speaking to all break up and go on their own ways, having achieved the state of this so-called aporia that is so characteristic to Plato's early dialogues, a general state of bamboozlement and confusion without any definite conclusion. Do not be misled, however. The conclusion that you have no conclusion is in itself a conclusion. Socrates, once again, as we see in many dialogues, is successful in proving to his conversation partners that they all collectively don't know jack, and therefore more thought and work needs to be done, both for the people in the dialogues and also for the reader. They must keep reading and keep thinking. This is the first step on the long path of becoming a philosopher king. Understanding that you don't know even the most basic yet severely important notions that make man who he is personally and societally. We of course saw the very same thing last week in our Alcibiades class. Now if Plato and Socrates cannot point us in the direction of friendship, then who can? Let me read you something here by great French man of wisdom, balding Rapunzel as some of you may know him, Michel de Montaigne. In friendship there is a general and universal fire, temperate and equal, a constant established heat, all gentle and smooth, without poignancy or roughness. In love, it is nothing but frantic desire for that which flies from us. As soon as it enters into the terms of friendship, that is to say, into a concurrence of desires, it vanishes and is gone. Fruition destroys it as having only a fleshly end, the same as satisfying a hungry stomach with food. Friendship, on the contrary, is enjoyed proportionally as it is desired, and it only grows up, it is nourished and improved by enjoyment as being of itself spiritual, and the soul growing still more refined by practice. This is excerpt from phenomenal essay titled On Friendship, written around 1580, and in no way can I compress it so as to accurately relay its excellence to you. So maybe you read it or I make a video about it one day. But for now, let it suffice to say that Montaigne follows in the footsteps of ancient Greek man by distinguishing between eros and philia. Yet the importance he places on philia is much greater than that of eros. As you just saw, when our physical desire is satisfied, the eros love fizzles out. We do not want any more food after our big tummies are full of mummy's cookies, as they say. And yet the philia love is slow and temperate. The more you desire it, the more you enjoy it. It grows. Both of you grow together as it continues to grow as well. Montaigne goes on here a little bit later in the essay talking about himself and a friend. I read for you. Our souls had drawn so unanimously together, they had considered each other with so ardent an affection, and with the like affection laid open the very bottom of our hearts to one another's view, that I not only knew his as well as my own, but should certainly in any concern of mine have trusted my interest much more willingly with him than with myself. This is a very important, subtle moment that I think is in fact the highlight of entire essay. Montaigne states here that a true friend will know your interests, and therefore if this is truly your friend and you wish to foster and trust in your philia, you must trust his takes on what your best interest is. For Montaigne, if his true friend tells him that he must immediately divorce his wife, he will do so, because Montaigne and his friend are two people whose interests and souls have intertwined on a spiritual level. How lovely. What is the best interest of Montaigne is also the best interest of the friend, and vice versa. They both place utter trust into each other and have never been proven wrong for doing so. I highly recommend you read this essay when you have the time. It is a fantastic exposition on philia of antiquity, on friendship, which does not really exist anymore for modern man, and in fact did not really exist at Montaigne's time either. Would any of you like to have such homoerotic friendship with me? Please let me know immediately, please. Now, to layer on top of what we find in Montaigne's essay, the idea that friends become one soul in two different bodies, I bring for you quote from man I consider to be Ubermensch indeed, our dear friend Cicero, Cicero. A friend is, as it were, a second self. We can also defer to Zeno with almost identical quote. A friend is another self. Do you like such definitions? Instead of making Platonic separation of men into good or bad, separate units that produce philia as a product between them, perhaps we should define friendship and philia as the union of two men into one. There needs to be no comparison between good and bad, whether like attracts like, because this union very quickly creates a single spiritual unit. Mayhaps you like such ideas. Regardless of how we define friendship, I wish to present you ancient example of friendship which remains very close to my heart. A story from antique world which you might have heard of before. This is of course the story of Damon and Pythias. The story goes that two ancient Greek fellers, Damon and Pythias, great friends, traveled to Syracuse during the reign of Dionysus I, sometime in the 4th century BC. Dionysus I is of course the epitome of a tyrant for Greek man, even though he did foreshadow the scale of conquest that we see later in great man Alexander. Anyway, Pythias somehow got himself involved in some legal trouble with the tyrant Dionysus, and he was thereby sentenced to death. Wow. In light of this sentence, Pythias requested that he be allowed to go home for a little while to return some videotapes, as we say. I.e., he had some personal affairs to settle at home with the wife and family and such. Obviously, the tyrant Dionysus said absolutely no way. He is not stupid. He knows that if he goes, he will never come back. Come on, man. And so Damon, the great friend of Pythias, offered a very kind service indeed. Damon would willingly become the hostage of the king as a guarantee for Pythias to come back. If Pythias returns, Damon will be set free. And if he doesn't return, then Damon will be executed instead of Pythias. Very brave, very bold, very loving. The tyrant Dionysus agreed to these terms, everybody agreed to these terms, and so Pythias went home to get his affairs in order. But he didn't return for a very long time. And so the tyrant Dionysus wasn't having any of it anymore and decided that it is time to execute his friend Damon as they agreed. It seems that Pythias will not be coming back. He really screwed his friend over. However, at the very last moment, beautiful moment, Pythias returned. Moreover, when Pythias returned, he apologized for being so late. Turns out that his ship back to Syracuse was captured by pirates and Pythias was thrown overboard. And so Pythias had to swim all the way to shore and make it back to Syracuse on foot. So not only did Pythias return as he promised, he returned in conditions that were extremely difficult, all in order to honor the life and promise of Damon. Damon had no guarantee that Pythias would come back, and I think for modern man, most people would not come back indeed to certain death. Let your friends take the blame, who cares, am I right? I don't approve this. The tyrant Dionysus was so moved by this display of true friendship that he let both of these people go in the end. It seems that this tyrant is not as tyrannical as we thought, huh? This is true friendship. So many chances for both Damon and Pythias to save their own self and allow their friend to die. And yet both of them trusted in each other, in the goodness of each other, in the philia between them. And so perhaps we can define friendship as a loving bond between two individuals that once again place unending trust into each other, knowing very well that this trust will never be broken. The love, the philia between them does not allow for anything but eternal life and love together. A single unit forming out of two men with mutual interest and potential. I believe we should disregard Socratic semantic refutations of like attracting like and opposites attracting and so on. I respect Plato and Socrates very much, but here we must make our own definitions, I believe. And so instead we should focus on the possibility of two great individuals merging into a single army of two. This is all I have to say for today. Next week we will continue with another Plato dialogue. In the meantime, I ask you two things. Come join my great Discord if you haven't already, and please let me know in the comments what your definition of friendship is. Do you side with Aristotelian notions, with antiquity notions, or do you believe this has all been muddled up and we should just take friendship whatever way we have it in the modern, boring world, unexciting world? I would of course appreciate a subscription from you if you haven't subscribed already. Otherwise, I will see you next Friday. Ciao.